I'm Dr. Cécile Cosculuela. Welcome to this ESL video on English grammar. And today we're asking ourselves the question, is a past action always expressed with the past tense? Because there are many students who think that as soon as they want to express or to translate an action that occurred in the past, they need to use the past tense. Is that really the case? Well, let's have a look at it. So let's imagine that this is a timeline, and this little line here, let me get the pointer, this little line here represents the present. So let's say this is a way to represent an action in the past. And the main point I think it is important to make here is the fact that there are several ways to look at an action that occurred in the past. In fact, we can distinguish at least 4 main ways to look at an action that occurred in the past. So let's have 4 cases here, each and every one with an action in the past here in a yellow square. Okay? Let's look at a first example. If I say, elle a fait du stop aux Pays-Bas pendant les vacances, in that case, faire du stop aux Pays-Bas pendant les vacances is an action that occurred in the past. It's completely finished, but that in itself does not tell me how to express it, what tense to use with the verb, because it doesn't tell me how I look at that past action. And the way I look at a past action is what tells me which tense to use, which verb operator I need to use. So in this case, let's say that as soon as I say pendant les vacances, it means that the way I interpret that event is as something that is completely distinct from my now moment. I'm not in phase at all with the fact of faire du stop pendant les vacances. I'm in a moment that's completely distinct from that. Faire du stop is completely out of phase for me now. Therefore, it is this out of phase way of looking at the past action that I want to express. And to do that, I'm going to need to use the past tense. And the translation will be, she hitchhiked in the Netherlands during the holidays or the vacations in the States. So that's a first way of looking at a past action. And obviously, there are others. So, yeah, you can also find that same degree of distanciation from whatever you're in phase with whenever you use the past tense to refer to something that is unreal, like when you say, well, what if we hitchhiked in the Netherlands next month, for instance? Okay. How about looking at a past action as if it happened now? Well, that's what that's what Bruce Music does in his video. Let's see if I can show it to you real quick. So, yes, do I have it now? Oops. Sorry about that. I need to get rid of this window to put this one up in the front and then show you real quick that he says,
So I'm 10 years old.
and that's about it, because all we wanted to see is the fact that obviously he's not 10 years old, and yet he tells a story that happened in the past using the present tense, because he really is in phase with what he's saying. So when he says j'ai 10 ans, He's really focusing, he's really referring to a past action as something with which he is in phase. So it has in phase truth value for him. And therefore, the most natural way to refer to that past action, because obviously he's not 10 anymore, is to use the present tense in French just as well as in English. I'm 10 years old. It's the same thing in other languages as well. So, insofar as you want to refer to something, an event that has an in phase truth value for you, you're completely focusing on it. It is your point of reference, it is your reality. It is what takes up all the space in all your mental space, all your psychological space. Then you use the present tense, whether what you're talking about happens now or happens in the future or in the past, like here when Bruce Music says, I'm 10 years old. So these are two actions that happened in the past and they're completely finished, but we can look at them in two different ways, and therefore we need different verb operators to express them. Let's go on to a third case. So in this case, when I say attention, j'ai cassé une assiette, the fact of casser une assiette, breaking a plate, is something that happened in the past and again is completely finished, but how do we look at that reality? How does the source text here, attention, j'ai cassé une assiette, refer to a reality? It is indeed an action that happened in the past, but we're looking at it from the viewpoint of the present. So our standpoint is the present moment, and from that standpoint, we look at the fact of breaking a plate. Therefore, we need to express the connection, the interconnection between these two events using the operator of interconnection, which is the perfect. And it's going to be used here with the present tense. Therefore, the translation will be using the verb formula VS plus have plus VEN. And in English, I have broken will be the right verb form. Be careful now. Be careful now. I have broken a plate before, but the point, what matters to me now, is what's going on in the present, what I am in phase with. Okay, so that's a third action in the past that's completely over and a different way of looking at it. And there's a fourth way of looking at a past action, as in this example here, il jura, Tim avait fermé la porte à clé. So in this case, il jura is referring to the reality of an event that occurred in the past and that will be expressed with the past tense. And from the standpoint of il jura, we look at an event that happened even further back in the past, which is represented here by this little cross. So again, there's an interconnection here, but this time it's between a past event from which we look at an event that is even more in the past, even more out of phase, which means we'll need to express it with the past perfect, VED plus have plus VEN. That's the formula of the past perfect, which we will find in had locked. He swore. That's the first event here from which we stand and look at what happened before that. Tim had locked the door. Okay, so four different ways to look at a past action, and the key to translate those past actions really is to ask ourselves Well, how do we look at the past action? And that's the only way for us to know what verb operators we need to use. We also need to be careful when it comes to translating because obviously here, avait fermé in French is very similar to had locked, but it doesn't mean that we have to have le plus que parfait in French, the pluperfect, in order to have had locked in English, not at all. So let's quickly take another example. Ils se connaissaient depuis 12 ans quand ils se sont mariés. The same analysis applies to this source text here. We can analyze it by saying that ils se sont mariés is our point of reference in the past. And from that standpoint, we looked at the fact that ils se connaissaient depuis 12 ans, which started 12 years ago and still is going on, which means that this past action, il se connaissait depuis 12 ans, is a past action that is being looked at from the point of view of another past event, which means that this interconnection requires to use the past perfect, and the translation of ils se connaissaient needs to be they had known each other for 12 years when they married or when they got married. Let's take another example as well for this case here, so you remember that that anytime you have le passé composé in French, you don't necessarily go for the present perfect, okay? So let's take another example. Je la connais depuis que je suis arrivée. It might be very tempting if you don't go R1, O2, I3, meaning if you don't go from the source text to its meaning that you can deverbalize thanks to a diagram, and then from that deverbalized meaning, reach a translation in the target language. If you don't do that, it's really tempting to go straight from R1 to I3 and translate je la connais by I know her. But if you're more careful, you can see that here it's not just je la connais, it's je la connais depuis que je suis arrivée. Therefore, the fact of knowing her is something that started in the past and still is true now, so it takes up all that space. It is seen as an interconnected event, and it needs to be expressed with the present perfect. Therefore, I've known her since last summer will be the right translation. Okay, but the main point here is just for us to remember that a past action doesn't necessarily mean that we need to express it in the past tense. That's just one of the four options that we have. And so the right way of dealing with those past actions is to ask ourselves, how do we look at the past action? And there are four main different ways of looking at it. And therefore, we can use either the present tense to refer to a past action as soon as we're in phase with that past action. Or if we're out of phase, we'll use the past tense to refer to the past action. And because we're completely disconnected from it. And if, on the contrary, there's a connection of the past action with the present tense, or to the present tense rather, if we stand in the present tense and look at what happened before, then this interconnection means that we need to refer to the past action using the present perfect. And if the point of reference is in the past, therefore, the interconnection is between an out of phase and an even more out of phase event. Therefore, in that case, we'll use the past perfect, or to be more precise, the past perfect simple, because in each of these four cases, the simple form is the one that is used with these different tenses, as we can see in the verb matrix. So the 4 cases we've been looking at are 4 ways of referring, of looking at a past action and therefore of referring at it. So you can associate, refer to a past action with the simple present or the present perfect simple or the past simple or the past perfect simple. And they all have in common the fact that they are including the operator that is the simple form, which expresses the idea of inscription. And inscription is something that you do when you present a fact to your co-speaker or speakers. So you inscribe a fact, data, on a sheet of assertion, that is to say, in the communication space that you're sharing with your co-speakers. And these are the 4 cases we looked at in this video. And of course, the simple form constitutes a system with the be plus ing form, which enables us to express the idea of meta-inscription, meaning we go beyond the mere fact of stating data, and we'll deal with that question in another video. For now, I thank you for your attention, and I'll see you in the next video. And in the meantime, I wish you all the best.